Welcome to Shop Talk with Brandy and James.
I'm Brandy.
And this is James. And we're here to talk about all things related to cross-cultural life and work.
We're going to draw from our experiences as we've lived different places around the world. And also occasionally we'll have some special guests. We can learn from their experiences. So I'm Brandy Welterlin, lived overseas for almost 20 years now. I lived with my husband and our two kids in Central Asia for 7 years. And now we live in Kandern in the Black Forest in Germany. I work in the staff care department with Eurasia area.
And I'm James Covey, also with SIL. And I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor out of the state of Texas and have been living internationally in 3 different countries. I'm currently residing in Spain. And if you were with us for our last podcast, we talked about why are we so tired and some of the effects, especially of COVID-19 and how it's kind of affecting all aspects of our life. And as Brandy and I were talking about this, we just really made us think about burnout, which is a really common theme, especially among cross-cultural workers, and something that I think is very much connected to what we talked about last week. Don't you agree?
Right. I think, whenever we're living in these high stress situations, which oftentimes cross-cultural workers are, you don't have a whole lot of margin. And we oftentimes don't realize that we're living at the edges of our margin. And so when something happens, like say a worldwide pandemic, there's not a lot of resilience there to build on. And so what we see is people who might be struggling, coming up on burnout, then that sort of pushes them over the edge too.
I think it's a term that everybody uses, and I think it's used in a wide range. Sometimes people toss it out there like, oh, I've had a rough week, I'm experiencing burnout. And then there's people who recognize it's got this strong mental health component and say, I've actually been burned out, and there's a lot of consequences related to that.
So James, do you have a good definition for burnout?
A lot of times when I think about burnout, I think about it being an extended period of time where someone experiences exhaustion and a lack of interest in things, resulting in a decline in their job performance. In those situations, demands of being placed on you exceed the resources you have available to deal with those stressors. Here's a question. Is stress good or bad?
I think it can be good and it can be bad. A little bit of both.
Totally. I mean, an exam is a great example of good stress. We actually learn and study because we have the stress of this exam. And having deadlines, you might be the same way, but as an ENFP, I tend to wait to the last minute, procrastinate, and then work really hard in the waning hours of the night. So
that's the best way to do it, right?
Totally. But having a deadline provides stress that helps us be able to work. So stress can actually lead to productivity, but there's a point where we leave that optimum performance and are overstressed, and that overstress can lead to things like burnout and then eventually depression. And you can kind of look at those on a scale of this good stress suddenly leads to being overstressed, and then can go down into burnout.
Where there's this point where stress is good, like you mentioned, stress is good. It's a motivator, keeps you going, keeps you focused. But then when the scale starts tipping, it can go rather quickly in the other direction where you're not productive, and it's the cumulative effects of it. And you're actually feeling fatigued and you're feeling discouraged, and your productivity lowers. And it can also sort of be a spiral too, if you're feeling these expectations on yourself to keep going and what's wrong with me, but you're experiencing this burnout, that you can spiral into feeling discouraged about yourself, which leads to maybe less motivation, less energy as well. So it can get to a point where it perpetuates itself as well.
Definitely. I mean, I don't think you can talk about burnout without talking about stress. Like, what would you say are some of the reasons cross-cultural workers specifically experience more stress?
Right. I was looking at an article online about burnout cross-cultural workers, and it says, it sarcastically asks, can cross-cultural workers experience burnout? It's like, oh, yes, they can. There are several reasons for it. One of them is most of us are living cross-culturally, and the cross-cultural is with the host culture that we're living in, and oftentimes it's among teammates as well. So we're dealing and living with understanding different cultural worldviews, different ways of operating on several different levels. Oftentimes it can be a bit easier to interact cross-culturally with our host culture because we expect there to be the cultural differences there. But amongst our teammates, that can come as a shock too, as both the people you're working with and the people you're working amongst, you're learning how to live cross-culturally and understand different perspectives too. So that can lead to higher stress.
I think at this point, I've counseled people who are from over 35 different countries, which is, I mean, is really cool to be able to do that. But in many, many situations, they say one of the most difficult things about cross-cultural work is actually learning American culture. Because so many Americans specifically are engaged in cross-cultural work, and we're our own culture. And that's like one of the challenges. You know, a lot of my British colleagues have said one of the challenges is actually learning American culture in addition to whatever culture you're living in. And for that, I apologize.
Well, it's so true. I'm so glad you said that. When we first moved overseas, I felt like people we were working with amongst had a chip on the shoulder. Like, what? I'm just American. What's wrong? You know, and I didn't realize what I was bringing with me.
Right.
Culturally, I was a little bit blind to our own culture. There's a funny story about this. There's an American guy walking down the street one day, and this family lived so close to the culture. They worked so hard living close to the culture. But then another worker who was German saw him walking down the street and just said, "You walk like such an American. Just stop walking like an American." And he's like, "Oh, okay." But stop and think about it. We do have a way that we walk. It's a little bit open. Maybe there's kind of a swagger to it or something like that.
I think for some of our non-Western colleagues as well, that not just American, but just kind of dealing with Western culture is challenging. It's different. Yes. And what's happening is they're having to adjust simultaneously to two different cultures. And that's challenging. You know, I think that stress and burnout absolutely exist in kind of more normal life. And burnout is happening. I think a lot of big corporations are starting to recognize that burnout is happening because their expectations and work demand, and a lot of people kind of live to their limits under just normal circumstances. You know, the days are full, the kids have lots of programs they're involved in, the parents have stuff that they're doing. Maybe they're going to church on the weekends, they're part of some social groups, you know, they're working 40 to 60 hours a week. And that much kind of input there's just a cost for that. Then you add living cross-culturally and having to learn a language, which is just really tiring on the brain.
And you're also, you know, you are dealing with the cross-cultural implications in your teams, and when you with your host culture, yes, you expect it, but there are the things that you don't get, and you know you don't get, but you don't understand why you don't get it. I think another thing that cross-cultural workers tend to deal with is this idea that our work is needed. And on one level, it is needed. What we're doing is really important and helpful and impactful. And because of that, we tend to have a lot of difficulty stepping back and saying no to things, because the things we're asked to do, the jobs that are in front of us all seem important and all seem meaningful. And so it's hard to be able to step back and realize, well, maybe if I don't do this, this isn't going to get done now. And it's hard to say no to those things. And it's hard to give ourselves permission to say no to those things. There's always a need there. There's always a yes there that seems important and seems like it's worth pursuing. But then we get to a point where we sort of paint ourselves into a corner where we're so busy on so many things on our plate, but we don't know how to step away from it.
When I think about causes, I can think kind of three different areas. There's a social area, there's a system area, and then there's a self. So that social is like we've been talking about, you know, dealing with our teammates, dealing with people that we live with that may be a different culture, and kind of adjusting to that and expectations that we both have on ourselves and that others have on us, and trying to deal with that. Then the system aspect could be related to having to do language school and how hard that is, and also the system of the organization or the company that they're with. How are they balanced at doing work and also taking vacation? And there was a recent survey done with one of our groups of people that really live in difficult areas. And one of the questions on that survey was, how many of you take all of your vacation? And it was amazing how few people said, yes, we take all of our vacation. So there's some system elements that can be a cause. And then finally, self, like a lot of times our own self-esteem, our self-worth, our expectations of ourselves And this is what we talked about last week, how COVID is complicating that, because now we're more tired, we're being less productive. And if we're only measuring productivity as a measure of how we're doing, then it's just, like you said, spiraling a little bit out of control.
We do have this sense of worth built into what we're doing and what we're investing.
Oh my gosh,
and the people around us too. And so, wow, it's so hard to step back from that. And the sense of calling to the people that we're working with. And some of our systems, we push ourselves, and organizationally, we tend to push ourselves as well. We push each other in our organization as well. It's so valued to continue pushing and moving and moving. And I think that's a lot with organizations that we work with too. We tend to draw people who are very motivated and strive for excellence and success, which are really great things. But what comes with that is this difficulty monitoring when to say no, when to step back as well.
Yeah, some great books that really aren't, I mean, they're not titled Burnout, but the book on Margin by Richard Swinson and the book on Boundaries by
Henry Cloud.
Yeah, Cloud and Townsend. I mean, those are both great resources of actually how to avoid burnout, because they're having a really healthy, well-balanced life and being able to say no. You know, margin, you've talked about a couple times, is that space that we create in our lives to allow for flex of something changing and coming in. It's, you know, the white space on a piece of paper translate to, you know, not planning things every day, or making sure that you build in some cushion work-wise and with what you have due and when it's due. And I think part of COVID-19 is we need to have a little more margin, because everything's costing a little bit extra.
Absolutely, it is. It's so helpful to see that margin helps us actually have more sustainability too. It's not being a slacker. It's looking at things for the long haul and seeing how can this life and this work that I'm doing be sustainable for the long haul. You want to talk about some of the symptoms of burnout. We've talked about some of the causes of it. What are some things that people can look for in themselves and maybe their family and teammates as well, if they suspect that maybe they're dealing with burnout?
I was thinking I don't know why anyone would run 2 marathons. Right?
Like consecutively, or like just in their lives?
Just ever. Because so Ellie, my wife, has run a marathon, and watching that process and watching people deal with the pain and suffering of running that far, I can understand doing something once, but the fact that anyone run more than one marathon blows my mind.
Yeah, well, you gotta get a new PR.
Yeah, that's right. Like, you would do that suffering again?
Absolutely, yes.
Wow.
I remember seeing my sister cross the finish line at the Cowtown Marathon in Fort Worth, and we were waiting for her, and I saw her come. I was like, "Yay, Jennifer!" And I saw the look on her face of just this agony, and I went, "Oh!" She stopped clapping. I'm like, she needs some help.
Right. I say that related to symptoms of burnout, because when you think about physical burnout, people that have pushed their bodies to not be able to go anymore, and the last 10 kilometers, 6 miles of a marathon, you see people physically just burning out. Their bodies are just giving out. And sometimes they're just collapsing or just cannot go on anymore. I worked as an athletic trainer for 3 years, and you see people hit that wall, and it's just, you're like, oh, wow, they're done. Their bodies cannot go on anymore. But for burnout, those symptoms aren't quite as obvious. There's that social aspect of withdrawing from others, not engaging, and even introverts, it's a change in their ability to engage with other people. Lowered frustration tolerance, which I think about people who have been living with their families for such a long time because of COVID, and I'm guessing some frustration tolerance might have gone, changed. I'm pretty excited. My baby brother is expecting their first child in about a month.
Oh, congratulations.
And there's a whole lot of people who are expecting their first child because of COVID, COVID babies.
Yes.
But there's not very many people who are expecting another child.
Exactly. They're going to be only children for a long time.
Yeah, COVID caused so much stress on families that there's not a lot of, third and fourth children coming out of lockdown.
Oh, no. That's exactly right.
Only the first.
I appreciate what you said about lowered frustration tolerance, where you feel like you get to sensory overload so quickly. When you're living with burnout, like it just could be like people talking at you or people wanting different things. It could be noises. It just
will you stop chewing so loud?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
it's more than just being pessimistic. It's also a shift of just cynicism about self, about
Yes.
others and about work. It's
Yes.
the ability to see things through the lens of hopefulness is just gone.
Right. Right.
And cognitively, there might be a difficulty concentrating, forgetfulness. I just can't focus. And if we think about burnout on a continuum, there's kind of these moderate symptoms and they kind of get worse, that spiral that you were talking about. What about physical symptoms?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's important to recognize that burnout doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it happens and it affects our whole system. I think headaches can be definitely a symptom. Tension, carrying tension in your jaw or your shoulders, tension in your stomach even. So people have difficulty sleeping as well.
Gosh, that sleep is so important.
It is. And that again could be a spiral if you're not sleeping. So you're getting more revved up and you're losing some more of your margin too, which makes it more difficult to sleep. So that can be a bit of a spiral. I asked my husband, Tracy, if he'd be okay if I share a little bit of our story.
Go on.
And he said, he said it was all right. But he has really walked through some pretty significant burnout when we lived in Central Asia. And I said, well, is there anything that you feel like is important to say, or like how you felt? And he said, I remember I couldn't get out of the rocking chair for a week. And for him to think about getting out of the rocking chair and doing something else was too much for him. And he was, before this time, just really pushed so hard to get translation help at moving forward and partnering with locals and working through the dynamics at our office as well. And he just got to a point where he couldn't do anything else. We ended up going to a counseling center in Thailand, and we went at the time. I was struggling quite a bit with some depression, and he knew that he wasn't in a great place. But I remember we were talking to the counselor there, and Tracy just offhandedly saying, I've had headaches daily for about 2 years. The counselor looked at it and went, well, I mean, is that normal? And Tracy was a little bit offended, like, oh, it's fine. Counselor pushed back. Actually, that's not okay. Your body's telling you something.
Right.
So I say that to say, be aware of what's going on with your body as well, because your body could be giving you signs that things aren't okay as far as how you're carrying your stress and where you are with that.
Are you familiar with a body scan?
Yes. So I think that's a great thing.
I'll walk you through a body scan just so the listeners can kind of know what it's like. Okay. And it's really, the whole point is just being aware of what is going on in your body. Like with Tracy, well, he had headaches for 2 years. It's worth doing a little check, because your body talks to you. A lot of times bodies hold stress, and we know that stress is kind of a antecedent of burnout. So I'll walk you through body scan.
All right.
So you could be thinking about, hey, what is going on in your life right now? You could, if you're stressed at work, for example, you could kind of focus on that for a few seconds before the body scan. It's about paying attention to each level of your body as you go through from head to your toes.
Right.
With kids, a lot of times I'll have them pretend they have a magnifying glass and they're examining kind of externally these different parts. A mirror, we're kind of imagining what that's like. So might be helpful to close your eyes, but I want you just to think about your head. Pay attention to what you are sensing. It might be discomfort. It might be nothing. Just think about your head. Think about all that you have going on in your life, and just focus on your head. Think about your eyes. What are they like? Do you notice anything? What about your jaw? A lot of times people tighten their jaw and hold tension in their mouth. Your ears, you get tired from listening. Keep scanning, keep thinking. It might be helpful to have your eyes closed and just really pay attention to what your body's doing, and think about your neck and your shoulders. Is it tight?
I notice my shoulders, they're up around my ears. I've been recognizing lately that I clench my jaw quite a lot. And I'm trying to be more mindful of that. And okay, I'm clenching my jaw. So what does that mean? What's going on?
Keep kind of scanning down, neck, shoulders, top of your back, arms. Hold that kind of tension of your life and see if your body has actually been talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
Move on down towards your chest, your heart, your lungs. Focus in on your stomach. A lot of people experience stress in their stomach.
Sure.
Just notice it, and it might be helpful to even write some of these things down after you're done with your scan.
Okay.
Think about your arms, your elbows, all the way down, your hands, your fingertips. Focus on your waist, legs, knees. I've had kids tell me that they feel discomfort in their knees, tension.
Okay.
Kind of pay attention to your body all the way down to your feet and out your toes. If you do notice that a part of your body is stressed or tight or discomfort, you can kind of pause and just in your mind focus on that part of your body for a minute. You could say a prayer like, God, I'm noticing I'm holding stress here, and I just want to give this stress to you and ask that you take it away from my body. And do some deep breathing and actually think about that stressful part of your body. And as you breathe, kind of exhale and release some of that stress.
I think it's such a great activity to just sit with your body and pay attention to your body, because there's so many cues there about what's going on. But we often don't take the time just to sit and listen to what our bodies and what our stress through our bodies is trying to tell us.
We get weirded out about our body. And I think this is certainly in Christianity, we're like, oh no, that's an Eastern meditation thing. And it's not.
Right.
We are an integrated being, and God gave us bodies to be a part of us and a way that we can actually know what's going on with the rest of ourselves.
Yes. I'm nodding my head vigorously. You can't see that right now because we turned our video off.
A lot of times work is an indicator of burnout, just because we spend so much of our life doing work, withdrawing from responsibilities, a lack of motivation. Like no matter how hard you want, you just can't pull the email up and start answering it. And
along with that is this feeling of incompetency that can come with burnout too. Like you have this idea of how well you're going to be able to do a job, and it's not happening. That can happen quite a bit with cross-cultural work as well, because the expectations are often muddled. And again, when you're working cross-culturally too, there might be different expectations or different cues that you're not understanding as well. And so what you would think of as success looks different. And so you can struggle with feeling like a failure, or feeling like I felt like I should be able to carry a 40-hour work week, as well as take care of things that fall apart at home, as well as have a good family life. And actually, that's a really high and unrealistic expectation if you're living cross-culturally.
Yeah, whenever you use that should word, it's an indicator for an expectation.
No, we say don't should on yourself.
Exactly. No more shoulding.
So as we look at this and we think about, we've talked about like a definition of burnout, some causes, especially as cross-cultural workers, and what we tend to live with and expectations on ourselves, some of the symptoms of it. Say you're talking to someone now who is experiencing burnout. How would you help them walk through burnout?
I think a lot of times in counseling, people will be in a burnout spectrum. They're somewhere on that where I've been overstressed for too long. And because of that, I'm losing traction in my life. And a lot of times, one of the first things they want to know is like, how long will this take to quote unquote deal with burnout so they can just get back to normal?
Exactly.
Nothing makes me want to jump out of my seat more than being like, your normal caused this.
Exactly. Like you're missing the point here.
Yeah. Never. You never go back to what you were doing. That's
Exactly.
You got to do things differently.
Right. We had someone tell us, the same counselor who looked at Tracy's like, oh yeah, so you've been having headaches for 2 years. And he said, cut back to 50% of what you were doing. Because who's realistically going to cut back 50%?
What man would do that?
Exactly. But it's a really good goal to set at. even as we were talking about working your home culture, we push ourselves to our limits anyway. Wow, it's kind of a freeing goal to have that for yourself, to say, okay, I'm going to work at 50% capacity. And that might have to be that way for several months or even a year or so.
Right. It kind of depends on where are you on this spectrum when you stop and say, actually, I'm in a bad way. Can't get things done. I'm totally lacking motivation. My body's talking to me. I'm not getting sleep. I'm gaining weight. I'm losing weight. All these things that are indicators of burnout. And, you might have to do 50% for a long time and then never go back to what 100% was. One of the hardest things about coming out of burnout is you're so worn out that just the idea of trying to do something else and do something new is totally overwhelming.
Yes.
Just like, I don't have the energy to answer an email, much less go for a walk.
Right.
And I think once you recognize that some of these things are happening, it's just really little things. So stop doing something, which takes far less work than doing something else. So working with your supervisor, working with your teammates and saying, I have to let go of some things. And it may mean some things go undone. And there's such like a pride, shame element connected to burnout. I'm feeling like a failure
really
and I'm too proud to ask for help.
Absolutely. And if I step back, then I really am a failure. I'm just going to prove to everyone that I am. I think also people who work with often develop expectations for us to work at those high levels. And so when someone who's experiencing burnout steps back, there may be pushback initially, like, oh, this is really important, or can you just do this too? And so setting firm boundaries is going to be important because people are going to expect you to go at 110% because that's what you have been doing.
Right. I had a friend named Mark, who, experienced some burnout, and he said he had to learn to watch grass grow. And he described like the amount of cutting back he had to do for time to kind of regain his overall sense of well-being. He goes, I had to just sit in the yard and watch grass grow for a month.
Okay.
It's such a great image of that effort it takes to just let go of things and give your being a chance to heal. Yeah, we didn't actually talk about spiritual symptoms, but I think a lot of times because of this shame, pride element, that it really affects our relationship with God being in burnout. Doing some of those really healthy disciplines, we can't make ourselves open up the Bible, or we can't make ourselves, participate in some of the things that give us a lot of joy. And that's another pretty big indicator of, hey, I'm not doing all right. So thinking about, in terms of what to do for burnout, how can you re-engage in a way that doesn't have a great energy cost, but still gives something to you? And a lot of times it's inviting people into a place of helping you. Back to Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens, thus fulfill the law of Christ.
Right.
You got to let somebody else help manage some of your burdens.
So it help them manage your burdens and help them be your accountability, let them into your life so they can see where you're making choices that aren't so helpful for you as you're moving back into work and building things into your life again.
Right. And that making decisions can be so hard for people who are overstressed and entering into burnout, that you might need to reach out to somebody, a counselor, a staff care representative, a trusted friend, a pastor. You need somebody to help you with some of these decisions, just because you just don't got it. You don't have that ability to be making decisions because it's so exhausting. And having somebody help you in that is the one decision that you definitely need to make.
Right, exactly. I was thinking about spiritually as well. We tend to equate our worth spiritually with what we're doing as well, and having time maybe spiritually to watch the grass grow. What does that look like? Just be able to sit with God and enjoy who he is, enjoy what he's done, recognize who he is around you, and without the expectation of performing for him, because I think that can get wrapped up in what we do as well. And so that could be a part of the healing as well, as being able to sit in his unconditional love and know that there's not an expectation involved of earning it.
Right. Yeah, I think Psalms 23 is one a lot of people think about when it's coming to doing the things you have to do to get out of burnout. And he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. In that whole kind of element of that, chapter is about things that God is doing for us. It's not about us doing something.
Right. I just also had this image of him too, like putting us in a really gentle timeout. Like, actually, you need to take a nap
That's right.
next to the water. I'm going to put you down for a while.
That's right.
Some things that help is building things into your life that are not work, building hobbies into your life, and just building some other interests outside of the job that you're doing. Because a lot of burnout is related to work.
Yeah.
And build in opportunities to laugh. And laughing is great medicine. And I think that maybe if you're struggling with burnout, you're going that direction, you may be able to step back and say, gosh, I haven't laughed in a long time, or I just haven't allowed myself just to sit down and just watch something hysterical or listen to something, or just like, I don't know, laugh at one of my kids' jokes or something like that. So giving yourself space to laugh.
I think digging into those things we all know that are really good for our health, eating right, sleeping, drinking lots of water, any exercise. It may be today you're going to do 5 minutes walking outside. You just got to go outside around the block and back. And it's just little bitty simple goals like that. And a week of that, you do 10 minutes and you have somebody that walks with you. So you're doing something social and having some accountability. And sleep is really important. Pay attention to those nighttime routines, whether it's turning off all kinds of screens up to an hour before you go to sleep, making sure you do go to sleep. It's about balance. And if you have so many things that cost energy on one side and not very many things that give it, then your life's out of balance. And my parents are such hard workers. Like my dad, who I love dearly, is such a hard worker. That's what he knows. If he's at home on a day off, he's a fireman. He's working in the garden, he's mowing, he's climbing on top of a tractor with a chainsaw. Like even his hobbies are related to like hard work.
Right.
And my mom's the same. And she was like, I need a hobby. Like they're at a point in their life where they're still working, but they have time for a hobby. So I've been trying to help her explore like doing something fun. For her birthday, I wanted to give her like a glass blowing class.
Oh.
And I did. And she's like, why would I do that? I was like, okay, I need to back to the drawing board.
Why would I blow glass?
Okay, right. Not your thing. That's all right.
That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. Right. And maybe your hobby is like physical exertion, and maybe that's a good thing, but just, right, look at, is this relaxing me, or is this just getting me more wound up?
Right. Is it giving you energy? Even if it costs, is the end result more energizing, even if you're tired because you ran a marathon or for some unknown reason ran a second marathon.
Exactly. Something I found whenever I'm working with people dealing with burnout, it can go with a lot of different things with burnout or anxiety and such, is to take inventory of yourself often. And I talk to teenagers about rating their anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10 and thinking about situations where you feel like those things are heightened. And so burnout is more of a long-term thing that we're looking at, but to take inventory of yourself, of what are my stress levels? Where do I feel like I am with this? Because often when we get to the higher end of the scale, where we're thinking about stress or burnout, obviously still can come back from that, but that takes more work and more time. Whereas if you're more proactive and you're able to see the signs and symptoms in yourself earlier, you're able to be more proactive and bring down the levels of stress and build in margins so that you're not living right up at that point, so that you have space in your life and you're less likely to get to that point where it takes a lot longer and that you actually have to pull yourself out of a situation.
Absolutely. I think it's so common in cross-cultural workers that we all need to be doing something proactively to be aware of it and aware of the possibility. And it's true for people who aren't living cross-culturally too, this tendency to extend ourselves. I heard one time, burnout is not about giving too much of yourself. It's about trying to give what you do not possess.
If we can encourage you to be aware of where you are, be aware of, where is your margin? How much margin do you have? Okay, maybe you're getting to the limits of it. How can you step back? Or maybe you realize, I still have some margin left, but I've noticed that it's decreasing a bit. Well, what can you do to proactively build in healthy patterns in your life to help you be more sustainable so that you're not reaching those critical points?
Well, thank you so much for being here, for taking part in Shop Talk, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right, thanks for listening, guys.